What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This week we got UFC 318, Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway for the BMF belt. Dustin Poirier's retirement fight in Lafayette, Louisiana. And decent card overall. We're going to go ahead and get right into the full card predictions. First fight on the card, we got Ryan Spann versus Lucas Brzeski. I'm going to take Ryan Spann. I'll take him to win by second round TKO here. Look, Lucas Brzeski, he's been knocked out bad by Waldo Cortez Acosta. Got knocked out bad versus Kennedy Nzechukwu last time out. Did sneak out a win versus Walter Walker, but, that was Walter Walker fat in his debut. Look, Ryan Spann, he's definitely one of the most inconsistent, terrible fighters in the light heavyweight division. Has some athleticism, but does tend to lose pretty much every other fight. Very 50-50 guy. Lost to Bogdan Grad. Lost last time out to Waldo Cortez Acosta. Was able to get some wins in between, against OSP. The loss to Anthony Smith really looks bad in hindsight, but, he should have the athleticism advantage here moving up to heavyweight, I believe, and he should be able to just use lighter man's skill to be able to get the job done. He is a better striker overall. You can't really ever trust him to win, but I will take him to win here. Round 2 TKO, just a little bit slicker and faster on the feet. He should be able to find a shot. Next fight on the card, we have Francisco Prado versus Nikolai Verentennikov. Nikolai Verentennikov last time out lost on the Henry Cejudo card. Pretty much got embarrassed by Austin Vanderford and lost to Danny Barlow before that. He's never had a win in the UFC. Lost to Michael Morales on the Contender Series. He's just kind of a decent striker on the feet, and he really doesn't have any ground game whatsoever. Francisco Prado is a striker for the most part, does tend to go out, use his aggressiveness. Did all right versus Daniel Zellhuber, was able to get a good spinning elbow TKO versus Ottoman Azaitar in his fight before that. He's an okay fighter, but last time out against Jake Matthews did pretty much get styled on. Jake Matthews, though, has a lot of UFC experience, good boxer. I think Francisco Prado should be able to win this against Nikolai. He should be able to get a decision here. So I'll pick Francisco Prado, 29-28 decision. Next fight on the card, we got Jimmy Crute versus Marcin Prachnio. Marcin Prachnio, good kicking, but other than that, you're really not a well-rounded skill set. Kind of an average fighter in the light heavyweight division. Has a notable win over Khalil Roundtree, but other than that, really not a career to write home about. Wins over guys like, Devin Clark, William Knight, losses to Vitor Prachnio, Modestas Bukauskas last time out. Very, very mid fighter. Jimmy Crute, Jimmy the Brute Crate, mate. Australian fighter. He's going to be younger as well here. His fight versus Rodolfo Bellato on UFC 312. Decent performance there. Lost to Alonzo Menifield, and he had a draw to Alonzo Menifield. I forget about those fights. Not great performances. TKO'd versus Jamal Hill. Not a great look. But, he has some decent wins over, Bukauskas, Alasashek as well. Lots of thunder in the background. Apologies if you heard that. But, yeah, look, his performance last time out versus Bellato, he looked good enough for me to pick him here against Marcin Prachnio. And unless Prachnio, kicks him like he almost did in his last fight, Jimmy the Brute Crute should be able to cruise to a decision. So I'll pick Jimmy Crute, 29-28 here again. All right, next fight on the card, we have Adam Fugitt versus Islam Dulatov. Look, Islam Dulatov, nasty prospect out of Germany on the Contender Series. Got a nasty TKO. Very aggressive fighter. He's had some good wins over in Brave and the Octagon promotion as well. And look, he's a talented striker. First round finisher for sure. And look, Adam Fugitt, he's decently technical, but just really hasn't been able to put anything together in the UFC. He's older, 36 years of age, 10-4 record. The win over Josh Quinlan really doesn't do anything for me. Josh Quinlan, hasn't even had success on the regional scene in Fury FC. He's lost there as well. Lost to Michael Morales, Mike Mallet. Those aren't bad losses to take, but he just doesn't really have a path to victory here, considering it's most likely going to be a striking matchup. That's where Islam Dulatov is very dangerous, super quick. He's going to find a nasty shot. So I'll pick Islam Dulatov a round 1 TKO. He's probably just going to land something mean like a flying knee, nasty uppercut, something crispy. It's going to be a first-round knockout for Dulatov. All right, next fight on the card, we have Bruno Ferreira versus Jackson Mcvey. They put together this matchup last second. Jackson Mcvey was supposed to fight Cedric Dumas last pay-per-view. Now he's stepping in here to fight a even harder matchup in Bruno Ferreira. Look, I think Bruno Ferreira, he's looked very good recently. He's improving on a fight-to-fight basis. You saw him last time out versus Petrosian. Got a very good submission there. Very good performance. Looked good in that fight overall, even in the striking against a high-level kickboxer. In his fight versus Dustin Stoltzfus, who, is a crafty veteran, tricky with his takedowns, Bruno Ferreira was able to stuff some takedowns, was landing good shots on the feet. He has good hooks. And, you look at his win versus RoboCop, you saw that on display. He has big power in his hands. And like I said, in that fight with Dustin Stoltzfus, I was there for that one live. He landed a nasty, nasty spinning elbow TKO. And, look, I'm pretty sure Jackson Mcvey is actually more of a grappler. Haven't dove too much into the tape study on him because, his fight got canceled last time out. But, yeah, look, I think Bruno Ferreira, a very well-rounded fighter, lots of UFC experience at this point. Very high level of competition compared to a Mcvey. Bruno Ferreira should be able to win this one pretty easily. I'll take him to win by a first-round submission after dropping him on the feet. Next fight on the card, we got Kyler Phillips versus Vinicius Olivera. Kyler Phillips coming in off of a loss to Rob Font. And you look back in his career as well, lost to Ruli and Paiva, which definitely isn't a good look. He has gotten some good wins, Pedro Munoz, Song Yudong. He's a technical striker and he's okay on the feet. Last time out, he's a technical striker who is okay on the feet. He can mix in the grappling. Last time out versus Rob Font, did push the issue with the grappling early, then gassed out and got outstruck in the latter half of that fight, causing him to lose a decision there as a hefty, hefty favorite against an older Rob Font, who is still proving to be game as always. So take that loss with a grain of salt, if you will. But the thing is that Kyler Phillips, he's a very evasive fighter, doesn't do a ton of damage. He's technical on the back foot, kind of like a less aggressive Mario Bautista, if you will. I actually kind of rate them similarly, but I think Mario Bautista is way higher level. I think their skill set is similar, but Bautista, I think, is genuinely a top 5 caliber guy. Kyler Phillips is definitely not that. And I think that Kyler Phillips is going to lose here to Vinicius Olivera, who has looked fantastic throughout his UFC run. Good KO on the Contender Series. Flying knee knockout of the year versus Bernardo Sopaj. That win's aging well. And also the win over Ricky Simone and Said Nurmagomedov. Those wins, are very solid. Ricky Simone, he's bounced back since then with 2 wins. And Said Nurmagomedov, we know how good Said is on a technical level. And, look, Vinicius is a clear pick here for me because his pressure is going to give Kyler Phillips a lot of issues. Kyler Phillips does tend to gas out, and Vinicius is going to constantly march him down. He's going to make him tired just like he did Said Nurmagomedov, and he's going to put the pressure on him. He's got, holy shit, there's a massive thunderstorm outside. He's going to put the pressure on him. He's going to damage him up. Sometimes he does get a little bit sloppy with his striking technique, but he's effective. And, big kicks to the body, winging hooks that have a lot of power. Sometimes they're hard to see coming, like a Yuri Prochazka type of hook from a weird angle. And his grappling last time out looked very, very improved from the Bernardo Sopaj fight. And, stuffed a lot of takedowns from Said, was able to get in advantageous grappling positions, and stuffed basically every takedown from Ricky Simone as well, who had great success last time out with his wrestling. That's an impressive win. So, yeah, give me Vinicius Olivera. I genuinely think he's better in every area. A little less technical on the feet, but he's going to hit much harder. He's going to do way more damage. He's going to be the one pushing the action. I think Vinicius Olivera gets a 2nd or 3rd round TKO here in this fight. I'll take him by 3rd round knockout against Kyler Phillips. Next fight on the card, Drod versus Kevin Holland. If you guys have watched my prediction videos before, you know how I feel about Kevin Holland. I despise picking him. I actually did pick him against Rainer de Ridder, funnily enough, because I will never pick Rainer de Ridder to win a fight. But I kind of feel the same way about Kevin Holland. I picked against him when he fought Gunnar Nelson. And who was his last fight before that one as well? Vicente Luque. I picked Gunnar and Vicente Luque to beat him. Picked him to beat Dolidze and Rainer de Ridder, funnily enough. I'm absolutely horrible at picking Kevin Holland fights. I did pick MVP over him, and I did pick him to beat Mikhail Olasejek, but I've gotten the last 4 Kevin Holland predictions wrong. I'm very bad at predicting his fights, but in this matchup, it's predominantly going to take place on the feet. We know D-Rod's a boxer. Last time out, he did get a good knockout against Santiago Ponzinibbio, really winding back the clock with a mean knockout right hook. D-Rod, he's a good boxer, but even in that Alex Morono fight, was looking a little slow, a little sluggish. I didn't really like what I saw from him there. And Kevin Holland last time out against Luque, he was looking sharp. Even though it's an older Luque who is a little withered at this point, striking looked on point, got a nice submission. Against Gunnar Nelson, he was defending the grappling pretty well, way better on the feet, dropped him in that fight. Kevin Holland, we know he has natural ability, very good jiu-jitsu, very good long-rangey striking. If he tries to win, he tends to do very good, but he has that quitting syndrome. But in this type of fight, he should get the job done. I'll pick Kevin Holland round 1 knockout. Just a long straight right down the pipe. Next fight on the card, Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen took a loss last time out against Fluffy Hernandez and lost before that against Nasruddin Imavov, but you're talking about two of some of the best fighters in the middleweight division. And before that, he was on a very good win streak, beating guys like, Paul Craig, Chris Curtis over 5 rounds, Andre Muniz, Bruno Silva, Jacob Malkoon. He was on a very good run in the middleweight division. Very talented grappler, very good submissions, ground and pound. Even against Fluffy, he was putting Fluffy in some bad grappling positions. But, Fluffy is just so dog tough and he has such good cardio. He's always able to push through it and get the better of those type of exchanges. But, look, Brendan Allen, he's going to be the more technical fighter here in terms of his grappling for sure. And even on the feet, he's got solid kicks, decent striking overall. We saw him, be pretty competitive with Chris Curtis, who I rate, decently. I can't stand him as a person in terms of his character, but he's a decent fighter. That win looks good. And look, Marvin Vettori, schooled by Jared Cannonier, had a close fight with Roman Dolidze last time out, but we know the deal with mediocre Marvin. He's beaten guys like Costa, Vettori. He's had some good wins, but he doesn't really have anywhere in this fight where he's better other than just the physicality and the brute strength. Really all he has is some sloppy straight shots on the feet, cannot put combinations together, and he's got an inside low kick. The straight left of Marvin Vettori is low-key underrated because he has dropped a lot of fighters with that. But, even in the first Roman Dolidze fight, really didn't do a lot of damage. He was on the back foot the whole time. I could see Brendan Allen, using something similar and being able to get takedowns once he starts backing up Vettori, who cannot fight on the back foot whatsoever. I see Brendan Allen using some round kicks, outstriking him, getting him on the fence, getting some takedowns, and I think he's going to cruise to a pretty easy 30-27 decision here over Marvin Vettori. Robert Whittaker was able to school him, was able to get the better of him in terms of the grappling at points. That's Robert Whittaker compared to Brendan Allen, I know, but Brendan Allen does have good takedown entries. He's going to be able to mix it up in this fight. And yeah, give me Brendan Allen 30-27 decision. He's going to be able to just stay a lot cleaner, land better shots on the feet, and Marvin will back up due to his, just lack of, shot selection and inability to use head movement to cut the distance. Just doesn't have that ability. He's going to get backed up and taken down against a guy with better grappling here. Much cleaner on the feet as well. Yeah, give me Brendan Allen 30-27 decision. Next fight on the card, we have Daniel Zellhuber versus Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson, crafty vet, still has some very, very good speed in his hands at this point in his career. Basically 40 now. I'm pretty sure he's 40 years of age. And we know the deal with him, the win over Darius Flowers. Last time out, got a clean win versus Ottoman Azaitar. You look back in the day, beating guys like Dustin Poirier. He can lose to Dustin Poirier. He can beat Dustin Poirier and then get stained by Diego Ferreira the next fight. It's hilarious. We know that Michael Johnson's very 50-50, very hit or miss, but he's a talented striker, very good boxing, and he's got crispy hands. Daniel Zellhuber, though, he's going to give him some issues because this is mainly going to be a striking fight. And where we have seen Zellhuber take some shots in the pocket against Prado, against Esteban Ribovic, even in that Ribovic fight, he looked good. He made it very, very competitive. And, nice body kicks, good front kicks up the middle. He's got nice rangy techniques. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but tends to stay safe. His elbows and knees were actually decent against Ribovic there, utilizing it against a smaller fighter, closing the distance against him. He utilized those tools pretty well. He is improving on a fight-to-fight basis still, and I think he's going to be able to kind of cruise to a decision here. It's a step down in competition against a very similar stylistic matchup, so I think he's going to be able to just kind of do enough, maybe kind of have a similar performance like he did against Ribovich, where he doesn't end up getting hurt and rocked in the third round. I think if he gets past the first two, as the younger fighter, he's going to have more juice in the tank. He's going to have a little more energy. He'll be able to avoid those big shots, which tend to cost him moments and cost him rounds. I think he avoids that against Michael Johnson, and he should be able to just use the long-rangey attacks. 1-2s, calf kicks, front kicks up the middle, knees and elbows when he crashes in. He should be able to just use those tools to get a 30-27 decision. Michael Johnson, he's good, but he just doesn't have a well-rounded skill set to have multiple paths to victory. So give me Daniel Zellhuber here, 30-27. Next fight on the card, easiest pick in months, Roman Kopylov versus Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa is not a good UFC fighter, and he hasn't been since 2020 when Israel Adesanya embarrassed him. Look, on his way up, he did okay, beating guys like Johnny Hendricks, Uriah Hall, Yoel, but ever since getting schooled by Izzy, he hasn't done shit in his career. He's pulled out of every fight. He clearly has no confidence. He clearly has no determination to actually compete and do good at this point in his career. Look, schooled by Izzy, lost to Marvin Vettori, not a good look. The corpse of Luke Rockhold, who was like 50 years of age, still like lost a round in that fight and was low-key getting tagged up by spinning kicks and left hands by just the oldest shriveled up Luke Rockhold you could ever imagine. So yeah, terrible performance there against Rockhold. He was old. He was supposed to get the KO in that fight, wasn't able to, and then lost to Robert Whittaker and lost to Sean Strickland. Not bad performances. He had his moments in both of those fights, but Roman Kopylov is just going to be a situation where everything Costa can do, Kopylov can do better. This is going to take place on the feet. Paulo Costa is not mixing in takedowns. If anybody mixes in takedowns, it's actually going to be Kopylov, who in his last two fights against Chris Curtis and Cesar Almeida showed to be able to use takedowns when he needs it. So he's been improving in that aspect of his game. If he needs the takedowns, he'll get them. He won't need the takedowns, though. I think Kopylov's probably going to knock him out within the first two rounds. Nasty, nasty head kicks, some of the best kicking in all of MMA, heavy body kicks as well. We've seen him stop guys like Punelli Soriano with the body kick. We saw him just stain Claudio Ribeiro with that head kick, and knocked out Chris Curtis last time via head kick. I had him there plus 475 by TKO. Awesome fight there. And look, his volume's getting better. He has nasty combinations, long form combinations. Chris Curtis, who's a guy that's very difficult to hit. Roman Kopylov was going in there with insane volume. Leg kick, 1-2, body, head kick. Nasty long form combinations, super accurate, hits hard. His boxing's improving. The kicks are always going to be a threat. And he's in the prime of his career now. He did take early losses in his career, lost at UFC 298 to Fluffy, but that's an absolute nightmare matchup. A technical striker like Roman Kopylov is always going to struggle against a guy like Fluffy, who's basically the Marab of middleweight. Kopylov is going to school Paulo Costa. Costa is slow, doesn't have power, he doesn't have any combinations, he's not good at setting up shots. Basically, all he can do is kind of pop shot, right hand to the body, right body kick, a couple of shitty jabs with the T-Rex arms. Roman Kopylov's going to be way faster, he's slicker, he's got better defense, better combinations, nasty counters, much better kicks. It's just a striking match where one guy is completely outclassed. I think the southpaw stance is going to give Paulo Costa some issues we saw in the Israel Adesanya fight. Izzy landing some really good kicks from southpaw. And I'll actually take Roman Kopylov to win again via round 1 head kick. I picked him, I think, round 2 head kick against Chris Curtis. And I'm going to pick him to win by round 1 head kick here against Paulo Costa, because Costa did get hurt in round 1 versus Izzy with a left kick from southpaw. I think that shot's going to be open for Kopylov as well. So yeah, give me Kopylov, round 1, left head kick. It's going to be the same shot that Izzy hit him with. It's definitely going to be open. Now that I'm talking about it, I 100% see that. I think Costa gets knocked out and possibly retires or gets sent to PFL. But he's just not a guy that belongs in the rankings at middleweight. I mean, maybe we feed him to like some guys on the come up, Azamat Bikoev. Maybe we could give him Azamat Bikoev or a Mansour Abdul Malik. Those are the type of matchups he's going to be taking after losing this one. But Kopylov, lock of the card. He's winning easily by knockout. Next fight, we have Ateba. Speaking of prospects, we have Ateba Abega Gautier versus Robert Valentin. Look, Robert Valentin, he was like the guy on the Tough season last year who was talking about ayahuasca and sleeping outside and shit. Definitely a character, but not very good at fighting realistically. I mean, he's got decent striking, but got smothered and schooled by Ryan Loder, and then got tossed around by Torres Finney for 3 rounds. And Torres Finney just is not good whatsoever. Yeah, Gautier is going to fucking smash his head in. Gautier, built like a fucking mini Ngannou, hits like a truck, insane athleticism, good takedown defense, good grappling overall, trains out of Manchester Top Team, which is really a gym that I rate. Lerner Kavanaugh, Lerone Murphy, Ibragimov, some really, really talented fighters fighting out of Manchester Top Team. And I think that Gautier is going to follow in their footsteps and, continue to be successful and stay on a good win streak. Yeah, I think he's going to be able to get a round 1 TKO here. He can mix in the grappling if he needs to. Valentin has no takedown defense, doesn't really have a lot of power. Gautier hits like a fucking Mack truck, and he's just going to slowly maraud forward. He cuts off the cage well. He cuts off the cage good as well, and, that's very, very impressive for a fighter who is still young in his career, who hasn't had a lot of experience, who clearly does rely on the athleticism a little bit. But even in his last fight, I know it was against Jose Medina, who's like an actual punching bag, but Gautier, he was cutting off the cage well. His footwork looked improved. He was picking his shots. The boxing looked pretty crisp. Gautier is going to be a problem here in the middleweight division. Dude, him versus Bakoev would be such a sick fight in the future. I was talking about Bakoev because, Paulo Costa should fight him. Him versus Bakoev, Gautier versus Bakoev would be a sick fucking fight. So I'd like to see that as well once both of them get a few more wins, get into their rankings, something like that. But Gautier's destroying Valentin. Sure thing. Next fight on the card, we have Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. Now, when I first saw this, I said Dan Ige wins this easily. But when I started thinking about it, I was like, damn, Dan Ige did lose to Bryce Mitchell, where that's not really a loss that I like to see. He was able to KO Andre Philly and lost to Diego Lopez Lerone Murphy after that. Bounced back with the win last time against Sean Woodson. But I see the Lerone Murphy loss where he did drop him in the first round, but Lerone Murphy went on to use the grappling to win the second and third round. Bryce Mitchell, same thing. I'm pretty sure Dan Ige won the second round, but Bryce was able to win the first and the third with grappling. Now, Pitbull wasn't able to take down Yair, hold him down, do anything with it, so you can't really bank on him doing that against Dan Ige, who does have better takedown defense, but it is something that Dan Ige has struggled with throughout his career. It wasn't a problem against Sean Woodson, obviously. Woodson, long-rangey boxer. He's not going to shoot any takedowns. Patricio is going to be a step behind on the feet for sure. He's got okay kicks. He's just well-rounded on the feet, doesn't really stand out. Has some power, but Dan Ige clearly hits way harder. They call him 50K Ige. It ain't for nothing. He has a lot of knockouts. You look at the Nate the Train win, lots of knockdowns in that fight. The Damon Jackson win, was able to get, multiple knockdowns before the stoppage in that fight. He has a very clean left hook, a nice tight left hook, and a mean overhand. And he is decent at winning minutes, got a clean jab, puts together combinations well, moves forward well. Trains out of Extreme Couture. He's very well coached. Doesn't have bad fight IQ for the most part, but it is sometimes not even the wrestling, but the jiu-jitsu that does tend to, cost him some fights, getting his back taken, costly takedowns, towards the end of a round. If Patricio Pitbull does go for that, he could have success here against Dan Ige. Like I said, you look back at the Bryce Mitchell loss, that's definitely something to take into consideration. But Dan Ige, definitely more in his prime right now than Pitbull, and Pitbull didn't have any grappling success versus Yair. Got dropped there with, a string bean right hand from Yair. If Ige is able to connect with the same right hand that Yair did, he's going to knock him out. But I'll pick Ige to win a decision here. I think he's going to score a few knockdowns, maybe get taken down a little bit in the first or second round, but I think that Dan Ige is going to win a damage-based decision here. A couple knockdowns, he'll get it done on the card. So yeah, give me Dan Ige, 29-28 decision. All right, we move on to the main event of the evening. Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Max Blessed Holloway for the BMF title. Now, this is a very interesting fight to try to predict because they have fought twice before, but you almost can't really even take into slight consideration their first fight. You really can't take that into consideration because Max, that was his UFC debut. He was like 21 or 22 years old or something like that. He was still very young. Dustin was able to sub him up. You look past that. Both of them were so young. They've improved so much. That was at 145. This will be at 155. You look at the last time they fought at 155 pounds. Max Holloway, he took it on like 5 or 6 weeks notice. Dustin Poirier was able to get the better of him and really won most of the rounds pretty clearly. Like, look, I know a lot of people say, well, Max was doing really good with the combinations. Yeah, he was landing numbers, but there was like not a single time really in that fight that Dustin was really, really hurt. And on the flip side, Dustin stung Max like 3 or 4 times badly, rocked him in almost every round. And, look, they have changed a lot since that fight, almost 6 years ago now. But there's something to be said about somebody having someone's number. And I think that Max Holloway, especially in the Volk fights, we have seen that he does struggle to make adjustments against guys that have an advantage over him somewhere on the feet. We saw that with Volk and, Dustin Poirier in their second fight. It's like Max couldn't adjust. He couldn't stop, the left hand from landing. And you look at his fight with Arnold Allen, I saw that fight 4-1. I thought it was a lot less competitive than a lot of people think, but that is against a southpaw striker where, a lot of people saw that 3-2 as a very competitive fight. They gave Allen, I believe it was 2-4. Like I said, I saw that 4-1, but nonetheless, he's having a little bit of adversity with a guy like Arnold Allen, who, even though he's more in his prime than Dustin Poirier is now, isn't as good of a striker as Dustin Poirier. So I think there's a high likelihood that Dustin Poirier could have Max's number. I think Max tends to struggle with the southpaw stance. I think the southpaw, open stance battle is a little bit difficult for Max Holloway to deal with. We saw that in the Volk fights. We saw that in the first Dustin fight. But there is something to be said about the improvements that Max Holloway has made. And he's also had more pure striking battles recently in his career, whereas Dustin Poirier, he's been fighting more well-rounded guys, more grapplers. I mean, you just look at his last few fights. Dustin, last fight against Islam Makhachev, grappler submission threat. Benoit Saint Denis, grappler submission threat. The last pure striking battle he had got knocked out by Justin Gaethje. Head kick there. And, the 2 fights before that, Michael Chandler, Charles Olivera, those fights did have a lot of grappling in them. A lot of striking exchanges as well, but he was worried about the wrestling and the grappling threat in all of his last 5 fights except for the Justin one. You look back at the Conor McGregor fights and the Dan Hooker fights, I think that's where you're really seeing prime striking Poirier. I think recently his striking has kind of fallen off a little bit just from having to prepare so heavily for these well-rounded grapplers. Whereas Max Holloway, Ilya, Justin Gaethje, TKZ, Arnold Allen, you're looking at a lot of pure striking matchups where a lot of them did go the distance. And, obviously the Volkanovski, Yair, Calvin Kattar fights, 2 Volk fights before that. He's had basically pure striking battles ever since that first fight with Dustin. And I think that's going to give him a massive advantage here because I think Dustin, where, he's been training so much grappling, where he's been focused on the threat of the takedown for so many of these fights, I think he may have gotten out of the flow that he was in like, the Conor McGregor fights. Whereas Max Holloway, he's still going to be so used to being in a extended striking battle. The volume is obviously going to be on Max Holloway's side. I picked him against Ilia Topuria, where he was doing fantastic in that fight. You could definitely give the first 2 rounds to Max, but Ilia, we know how he is. He hits different. I mean, he's just too powerful. Max couldn't take that right hand and the left hook behind it, but was doing fantastic in that fight. Took the first 2 rounds off of Ilia, and of course schooled Justin Gaethje. I mean, made him look easy. And, these are very, very good looks for Max Holloway on the feet. And, looked fucking sharp in both of those fights. At 155 against Justin Gaethje, don't get me wrong, that was a very, very dominant performance against Justin. But don't forget that there was 2 eye pokes in the first 2 rounds, and Justin had a broken nose. I know that Max caused the broken nose with a spinning back kick, but all I'm saying is that if Justin didn't get double eye poked and had his nose broken, that's a completely different fight. And, in the Ilia Topuria matchup, looked sharp against one of the best strikers in the world. I think Dustin, there is a chance that he comes into this fight thinking, okay, it's my retirement fight. I finally don't have to worry about takedowns. If anything, I'm going to be able to mix in the grappling, and I'm going to be able to utilize some of my jiu-jitsu. Dustin does have very good jiu-jitsu. You look at the submission win versus Michael Chandler. He's gotten some good submissions in his career. Submitted Max Holloway in their first fight. There is a chance that DP says, okay, I finally don't have to worry about the wrestling. I can just let my hands flow. And if he fully, hits a flow state where it's just pure striking, there is a chance that Dustin Poirier, can do the same thing that he did in their fight in 2019, because his striking is definitely hindered by the threat of the takedown. And I think that if he's just in a boxing match like he was against Conor in the rematch in 2021 or 2020, whenever it was, I think there's definitely a high likelihood that he could have success here and make adjustments on the fly, because Dustin is very, very good at making adjustments in the middle of a striking battle, whereas Max Holloway really is not. Max, he'll find 3 or 4 good shots that he can land the whole fight, and he'll do that. But he won't really switch things up if he's starting to lose. We saw that in the Volk fights and in the DP fight. Dustin can definitely, switch things up. You saw in the Conor fight, was getting touched up a little bit with the, the lead paw of McGregor. But the lead paw of McGregor was low-key touching him on the chin. But he started landing that jab counter hook. He started timing that left hand, getting out of the way, countering with a combination, and eventually finished him up against the fence. And even in the Justin Gaethje, the first fight that him and Justin Gaethje had, Justin was landing really, really good leg kicks in the 3rd and 4th round. But then Dustin started to counter the leg kick, and that's eventually how he got the finish. And look, I think that Dustin doesn't ever have any difficulty fighting against an orthodox or a southpaw fighter. You saw him have success against Justin, who is orthodox. You saw him have success against McGregor, who's southpaw. I don't think that the stance switching of Max Holloway is really going to give Dustin too many issues, not on the feet at all, because Dustin's very good at fighting against both stances. And I think that his countering ability is actually going to be very good if Max switches to southpaw, because whenever Max did get touched up against Arnold Allen, it's when he switched to southpaw and mirrored Arnold Allen. If Max Holloway tries to switch stances here and goes southpaw, I promise you Dustin Poirier is going to tag him up every single exchange that Max is southpaw. Max needs to stay orthodox here in this fight because his defense is much, much better from orthodox. I mean, the only reason he got knocked out against Topuria was because he was switching stances. That's when Topuria caught him with the overhand. I could see Max switching stances, going into southpaw, maybe firing a jab. Dustin slips, comes through the inside with a mean left straight down the pipe, similarly to how he did in their rematch. I think I've made my case for, stylistically, why both of these guys could have success. Max Holloway, he's had much more striking battles recently. Dustin Poirier, he's had to worry about the grappling so much, the striking may not be as sharp. Max is definitely going to be a little bit more in his prime. We saw him look really good against Ilia, looked great against Justin. Whereas Dustin looked good against Islam and did win against Benoit Saint-Denis, but didn't particularly look great in either of those fights. And in the Islam fight, did tear his ACL, did get injured. It looked like he had a war in that fight. Definitely took a lot of physical damage. He's had time to recover. There is something to be said about Max Holloway getting chinned, though, for the first time. Whenever we see these guys with iron chins finally get it cracked, they tend not to take a shot the same. And Dustin, he's going to be landing here. He's not going to have the threat of the takedown. He's going to be landing accurately. Max did struggle to take the power from DP last time out. The Justin Gaethje fight has asterisks, 2 eye pokes, broken nose. That fight's different without those factors. It's a very difficult one to call here because there's just so many different variables that go into this, and they fought twice, but it's just so much different this time around. And, if Max's chin is not recovered, there's a possibility that Dustin's able to drop him all over the place like he did. And this is going to be Dustin's last fight, quote-unquote last fight. If he wins, he's not retiring. Make no mistake. If he wins this fight, he's calling out Ilya. He's trying to get a Justin Gaethje trilogy. If he wins this fight, he's not retiring. If he loses, though, he will retire. But you got to think, hometown fight, the crowd is going to be going absolutely bananas for every single punch he lands. That does sway the judges, make no mistake. A lot of the times the judges don't have a super clear view of what's actually going on, and whenever the crowd goes fucking crazy, subconsciously in their minds that fighter's doing better work, even if it's very, very even. I'll take Dustin Poirier to get the job done here. I think Dustin is going to be able to make adjustments on the feet. I think he's very good at making striking adjustments, whereas Max Holloway's not. Max has never been good against southpaws. Dustin's very good against switch stance fighters, and both stances he doesn't struggle with either one. No threat of the takedown for Dustin. Dustin can actually get his own takedowns going if he needs to. Max, the durability has always been legendary, and I know Poirier has different power, but I mean, is your chin going to be the same after eating the shots that he did from Poirier? Even though before he got knocked out, he ate like 5 mean ones from Poirier. He's going back up to 155. He's going to be a little bit more rejuvenated, but you know, that's going to even out with the crowd going stupid every single time Dustin Poirier lands anything. I think the odds are correct here for this fight. Max, very slight favorite, -115. Dustin, -105. That's accurate to me. This is a pick'em fight for sure, just because there's weird variables going into this one from where they fought the first time. Interesting stylistic matchup for me here because, you know, I love this fight. I think it's a very, very competitive fight. I think it's going to be 3-2 regardless, but give me Dustin Poirier to win his retirement fight and then not retire. He's going to call out Justin Gaethje for a trilogy. He's going to call out Ilya. If he loses, he'll retire, but I think Dustin Poirier gets this one done. I think Max Holloway goes 0-3 again against the same fighter. And also, I do tend to pick whoever won the first fight whenever somebody has a rematch. You know, Israel Adesanya versus Whitaker, Dricus du Plessis versus Strickland, you know, John Jones versus DC. Most of the time, whoever wins the first fight wins the second fight. And I think that's going to be the case here. Give me Dustin Poirier to win a decision. One of my least favorite fighters of all time, but I do respect the skill set. I would actually love Max to slump him on his face, but I really don't think that's going to happen because Dustin Poirier, he's the type of guy to beat Max. Oh, you're a legend, bro. You're still a BMF. You're still a BMF. You know, keep your head up, dude. But this is my house. This is Lafayette. This is my house. That's exactly what DP's little smart aleck fucking... That's what his smart aleck ass is going to say after he beats Max. I would love Max to slump him out because I low-key can't stand Poirier. My most popular video of all time was Poirier's last fight against Islam Makhachev. I said he had a better chance of getting struck by lightning and winning the lottery in the same day than beating Islam Makhachev. And I was dogging on DP. I was hating on him because I could not stand Dustin if he would have won the belt in that spot. So I was rooting against him heavily last time. And look, don't get me wrong, I've never liked Poirier. I've always been a Conor and Justin Gaethje fan, so, you know, obviously I'm going to root against him in those spots. And, you know, Max has a future in the sport. If he wins this, you know, he can get a rematch with Ilya. He can continue to have good fights in the lightweight division. Rafael Fiziev, Charles Olivera rematch. He's got awesome fights on the horizon if he wins this. But if he loses, it's going to be sad because it's like he goes up to lightweight, loses, and now, you know, where is he at in the rankings? It's going to be awkward for him. But Dustin won't retire if he wins, so Dustin will continue to fight. Besides the point, though, Dustin Poirier, 3-2, 48-47 decision for Dustin Poirier in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's going to be controversial. I could see it being a split decision. I could see people saying robbery. It could be one of those fights where Max has like 100 more significant strikes, but he gets knocked down in one of the rounds. Dustin Poirier maybe gets a 10-8 in a round. It's going to be one of those types of fights, but looking forward to it. I've yapped long enough about it. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Like and subscribe. That would mean a lot to me, and enjoy the card next weekend.